So I personally have been a vegetarian with a lactose issue for a little while. So I don't necessarily call myself a vegan, but I have a reasonable number of friends who are vegan. They don't consume honey because it's an animal product, and some of them have claimed that they have ethical issues with regards to bees and beekeepers. Is that a valid concern, or is that a misguided concern?
I think in terms of a personal choice, if they don't consume it because it's an animal product, it's a totally personal choice, and I've got no issue at all with that. In terms of the beekeeping practices, I think there seems to be this negative connotation that beekeeping is just like bee farming, and farming in the negative sense where, we've got masses of bees that are being abused and we're just constantly stealing their honey. But I work with so many beekeepers, both from the commercial scale, so really, thousands and thousands of hives, to hobbyist and amateur beekeepers as well, who only have a few hives. And everyone that I've met, they love their bees. They don't want their bees to be sick. They do it because they love it. It's not just a money-making scheme for them. And they really look after their bees well. And I think people are really concerned about, the safety and health of bees, because we know that bees are dying around the world. But if we don't have these beekeepers who are very experienced and who know how to look after their hives and look out for diseases and be able to pinpoint when their hive is sick, how will we save the bees, right? If we can't tell that they're sick, if we don't have these beekeepers and we lose that whole practice, we won't be able to have these healthy managed bees that we know are essential for our food production, because bees pollinate something like 2/3 of all the food that we consume. It's not just one issue, it's a multitude of issues. So it's things like pesticides, it's things like a poor understanding of bee health or inexperienced beekeeping. It can be access to floral resources. So a lot of the Australian commercial beekeepers need access to national parks and public lands to get all those beautiful eucalypts that their bees can be foraging on. And if they don't have access to those places, where do the bees get their food?
Right.
So there are lots of complex issues. And there was this series on Netflix called Rotten, which you may have watched, and I watched the Cowboys and Bees episode of that one.
Right.
But they talked about the dangers of pollination, and in particular almond pollination. So we know that almonds are a hugely popular food at the moment, almond milk and all sorts of things that you can do with almonds. And almonds are pollinated by bees. So what happens during almond pollination season is thousands of beekeepers around the country all come together in this almond orchard. And you can imagine that's very many, hundreds and hundreds of hives, right, that are all in close contact with each other. If one of those hives has a sick colony, then there's a potential to make lots of those hives sick. And if we don't know how to look out for those diseases, then how will we know that the bees are getting sick? And when we take them back to our own house and you look around at the bees, that sick hive is now coming in contact with, it could be this flow-on effect. So that's one of the main messages that came out of this series, and people are very aware now that this, pollination is something that we should be looking at, and we should be thinking seriously about how we can monitor the health of our bees and our beehives.
Wow, that's fascinating. I had no idea.